district, you know the Pope listens. Dynasty, our religion, for the blokes missing. On all of these trades, on all of these plays, on all of these grades. By the end of the day, y'all getting played. So, what you gonna do next? Try to fill up that flex? Send the homie a text? That trash offer's the best? You try to make it complex, then they text you back. Now all of a sudden, they don't make any sense. Broaden your horizons, boy. Dynasty's not for the Simons, boy. These trades not for consignment, boy. Respect your opponent, y'all some piranhas, boy. This my advice from me to you. Open up your cute little podcast queue. Search up GOAT District, my dude. Pop it in your ear, man. Y'all know what to do. It's the... And I always be traded. And I always be traded. And I always be trading. Y'all try to betray them, but first you gotta bait them. Fish.
Welcome, Fantasyland, to the GOAT District. Dan, I had finally figured out how to bring in the guest, and I messed it up. But whatever, man. It's all good. It's almost the holiday season. I got Matt and I were talking. We got like a couple days left to work. I'm hoping I can clear everything out actually tomorrow, so that I can start a little early. But it's that time of the year. You know, we're anxious to just spend time with our loved ones, forget about work for whatever amount of days that we have off. And it's playoff time, guys. It's you know, you either had a bye week one or round one, you either won round one, or you're, you know, maybe not in the playoffs in all your leagues, or you're kind of looking to either maybe something like the playoff challenge that we're going to talk about later today, or just to 2021, which we're also going to talk about. Before we get into the goodness, Dan, just some quick housekeeping, because I usually try to throw this at the end and I miss a couple things. So I just have some quick things. First, I just want to thank Fantasyland. Dan, we are super lucky to be part of this, you know, community, you could call it. People are just some good peeps out there. I threw a quick tweet on there. I was a little distraught. Found out my uncle had passed away from COVID on the weekend, and just the amount of people that just sent well wishes and, you know, sending condolences and stuff. So I wanted to just thank everyone. If you're listening and you did that, I really appreciate it. Talked about the playoff challenge, guys. We've had a contest going this whole month, and it actually started towards the second half of November. If you buy GOAT gear on Viridian Global, or you give Dan and I a 5-star review on, what is it now? Is it iTunes? Is it Apple Podcasts? I think it's Apple Podcasts. Either way, go give us a nice review. Those are two ways that you can support us, and that gets you into a contest to win one of two entries. One is a $200 entry into the FFPC Playoff Challenge, and one is a $35 entry into the $35 Football Guys Challenge. So I'll put up some details for that a little later on, but I just wanted to make sure that, you know, because if you guys are listening to us, you're the reason that we're putting this contest together. I didn't advertise this anywhere else. Dan and I didn't advertise this on Twitter, anywhere. We want our listeners to take advantage of this. So for those of you that have tagged us on your GOAT gear, we appreciate that. All right, it's enough of me rambling. Dan, today's topics, we brought in specific guests. This is like surgery, guys. We want to make sure that no matter where you are right now in week 15, that this episode is going to help you. So we're going to start off looking maybe towards the offseason, the NFL draft, even 2021, and we brought one of the best, my boy Matt Hicks. He's been on the show a few times. You know him. He's all over Twitter. He's going to tell us about his new position. Dan, it's almost as fancy as your title, I'm going to say. Right. And then we got our boy Theo, who look, again, specializes, does waiver wire for the breakout finders, and he's been generous enough to jump on with us again. And let's get to it. Matt, welcome back, brother. We appreciate you coming on.
JD, my man, you know I'm always happy to chat it up with you guys. And hey, I know a lot of people are focused on the playoffs, and I got a few teams left. Unfortunately, not in the GOAT League, but you know, I'm always hey, it's 2021 draft time too, so I'm always looking a few months ahead. But I'm glad we're doing both, because I think, you know, that's where we're at right now.
Well, Dan, I think you'll agree. Well, even if you're not necessarily not contending and looking to the prospects, you're still probably moving draft picks that are very relevant to who, what am I missing? What's that opportunity cost that I'm missing out on?
And I'll tell you, JD, it is not a bad year to win your championship and then draft with the 112, because I think you'll still be happy with who you get, and you'll have the money and the trophy to go with it.
See, perfect. There you go. That's right there, right or downer. Right, Dan?
Yep. Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, that's always encouraging to hear, because, sometimes the 101 is just so clear-cut, that everybody's falling all over themselves to get it. But when it's one of those nice, deep drafts without the one scintillating star at the top, that's what you love to hear when you're in the playoffs.
Theo, you've been on the show a couple times. Welcome back. We appreciate you spending time with us tonight. And we're going to talk about those waiver wires. That's something that you specialize in. Why don't you tell the listeners who maybe aren't following you or your goodness where they can find it and exactly what they'll find?
Well, you can find me on Twitter at the OG Fantasy. And I'm also writing the waiver wire article for breakoutfinder.com and a few other articles here and there. So it's a mixed week for waivers. There's not really a slam dunk guy that you can just plug and play like Cam Akers last week. But Jeff Wilson is looking really good to me this week. I think he's going to be a plug-in running back 2 against Dallas. I think that's a game that San Francisco could control, and that's one I'm really looking for.
Nice. Right away. I love that. See, just both of them throwing out the goodness right in the intro, not wasting any time.
It's week 15. You got to get after it.
Exactly. And that's what we'll do. We'll get right into it. We'll finish it off with some trades, some tweets, and whatever else mess we decide to get into. First round or first half, guys, the boardroom. We usually talk strategy. So just again, going back to Matt, looking, and we kind of started the conversation, right? You're saying like being at the back. Previous years, you wanted to be at the front. I'm even hearing like 2022, you probably want to be at the front end of that first round. You can correct me if I'm wrong there, but what is your overall, and maybe you touched on it, you can elaborate, like what's your overall opinion on this upcoming class, on these prospects, and how is it changing your strategy as we move into this, off season and then obviously towards the draft and 2021?
Yeah, JD, it seems like every year you want to be honest about the upcoming draft class, right? Because I think the biggest knock on the guys who get really excited about the rookie class and do the scouting, the biggest knock is that they tell you every year is better than the year before, right? And so we like to be honest about our up years and down years. I think overall talent in this year's 2021 class, it's just as strong as last year's class. However, the character and the makeup of the class is going to look a lot different. And so I think when you're talking about the class overall and the character of it, and just kind of we can start, at the top here and dive in where we feel is most interesting. But I think in terms of quarterbacks, we're going to see a strong class, very strong at the top. Could be some really good depth as we move through the draft combine here. Running backs, it's going to be a tough year for running backs. We got spoiled this last year with 4 or 5 good guys we could argue about. There will be good players and past the big top 2 that I'm sure we'll get into, but it's a lot shallower. Wide receiver position, deeper than last year, and last year was a deep class. This is a good year for you if you need to draft wide receivers. And then we're making a bounce back from last year's tight end class, one of the weakest tight end classes we've seen in recent memory last year. Well, we're going to flip that on its head. We got some really talented tight ends coming out. And don't you know that in fantasy football, we need some tight ends coming out. So that's kind of the overall character of the draft. And I think in terms of strength, it might not have as much punch at the top as last year's class, but I think we're going even deeper, which should be really exciting for fantasy players.
Interesting. I'm going to we love talking running backs on here just because of the fluctuation in their values. So I found myself, and I think I asked even this question last week or the week prior, I find myself hesitant to move some of these running backs that I might normally going into the offseason, because I like to kind of position my value at a more stable share, if you know what I mean. Whereas because of the running back, like one day there's Zeke, circa a year ago, and now there's Zeke circa today. how do you, and we can discuss this, all of us, like, how are you approaching that? Are you maybe holding on a little tighter to your running backs going into this offseason?
Yeah, JD, I think, starting here with really understanding what the class looks like. And so I mentioned it's not last year's running back class. Last year you had the big four, right, between CEH, Swift, Taylor, and Dobbins. And now for a lot of folks, that did extend down to Cam Akers. That did extend down to some other backs. There were arguments 5-6 running backs deep for who you liked. With this year, it's going to be a clear-cut two guys. It's going to start with Najee Harris out of Alabama. Harris coming in at 6'2", 230. He is an absolute wrecking ball. Dude, an absolute monster between the tackles, barreling over SEC linebackers, which I like to say is the closest position group you can get to playing NFL players on Saturdays on a college football team. Explosive, tremendous contact balance. But here's the most impressive thing. The man I mentioned, he's 6'2", 230. He is extremely athletic, and he is the best pass-catching running back in this draft class. I want to set that precedent out there. They move him out wide. He runs routes like a wide receiver. Najee Harris, man, he can do it all. And so for most folks, it's either going to be him as the top running back they like, and it's a little bit of a dealer's choice here if you like Najee Harris, or Travis Etienne, the running back out of Clemson. 5'10", 210, really, really fast, explosive, home run type hitter. Some of the best acceleration in the class, especially at the running back position. So, with Najee Harris, you get speed and athleticism. With Travis Etienne, you get your burner, you get your big play, explosive type running back. And past that, if you ask 8 to 10 draft guys right now who their running back 3 is, you're going to get 8 to 10 different answers. It's a wide open ball game. And that's not to say there's not talent. There's going to be plenty of running back talent past that top 2. But when we're thinking about value, it is a sharp tier drop. It's a sharp cliff drop. And so when you're talking about, for me, protecting my running back value, I see a lot of people panicking on Zeke right now. A lot of people panicking on running backs they're not happy with. Make sure you're getting back a top 4 pick in a super flex league or a top 2 pick in a non-super flex league if you think you're getting a really good rookie running back that's going to come in and make a quick impact next year. It's not like last year's class where you can have the 107 and luck your way into DeAndre Swift falling to you.
Theo, Dan, you guys, anything to add or anything specifically to the running back position?
Man, I'm just sitting here writing stuff down because I am just starting to think about rookies, and so I really appreciate people like Matt getting me up to speed on them in a hurry. I guess my one question would be, it sounds like Najee Harris is probably a better receiver than, say, Jonathan Taylor. How would you compare him in other aspects to Taylor?
Yeah, in terms of running style, I think you're going to see a lot of the same things in terms of really being effective in between the tackles. Both those guys we really like to keep in between playing mostly in the A and B gap in the college setting. I think Najee Harris has better contact balance. It's not taking anything away from Jonathan Taylor. He's got better contact balance. I think he's not I think. Yeah, Jonathan Taylor definitely has better straight line acceleration than Najee Harris, but Harris is a little bit more fluid of a runner, a little bit more athletic. But I think he's going to be used in a very similar way. Both Taylor and Harris are going to come out with those vision concerns. Harris definitely in terms of his biggest knock, and that is not a position you want to be that's not a weakness you like to have, right? Vision concerns are scary. But that being said, still a super productive guy at Alabama. Both of those guys played full careers in college, and both of them have a lot of stats put up. But Najee Harris doesn't have as much run on his tires. Remember, that was a big knock on Jonathan Taylor coming out, was how many carries he had. Because I think he had like 300 a year for 4 years for Wisconsin. He was the only back. Alabama is 3 deep on NFL talent running backs at all points in time. So guys like Brian Robinson, or even years before, these backs coming out of Alabama, it hasn't ever been just Harris. So there's a lot of knocks on him being older, a senior coming out 4 years. What does that mean for his NFL career? It doesn't bother me because, first off, you usually get one contract, right? First contract is what you want on your running back anyways. And secondly, he's not getting the type of wear and tear in college that a lot of these backs who stay 4 years are getting. So similar profiles, Dan, but I think the biggest deal is that Harris is not going to be as fast, but he's going to be a little bit more fluid, a little bit more athletic, better lateral movement.
Where do you see Javonte Williams in that mix? Is he close to them, or is it a tier break? Because I like him a lot.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I know he's getting a lot of hype out there right now, and because he's put up some big games, especially as of recently. So Javonte Williams is right in there with my tier 2 backs right now. I've done an initial tape review on him, and I have to say, like, for my first 2 or 3 games, I definitely like Javonte Williams. He's not quite as exciting as I thought he would be. And again, initial review only. So right now, he's my running back 5, and he's 24 overall on my rookie big board. And so still pretty high, but not super high. For me, he definitely has those elements of being a powerful runner. That contact balance is something I love to see from my running backs. He's got that low center of gravity. And we've seen some levels of burst and explosion, but it's not there as consistent as I would like from Javonte Williams. And I'm not knocking him at all. This was a guy who we didn't see much until this year. So it's going to take a little bit more tape review for me to get more comfortable with his game. But definitely somebody who's in that tier 2 category. And when I say, you can ask 8 guys and get 8 different players, Javonte Williams is definitely a name that you would hear come out of their mouth for who's that running back 3, who's the next guy up after Etienne and Harris.
So I guess looking super flex, just like for me, the next position I really want to know about, especially on my super flex team, because Dan and I were talking about this, and I actually did this in my FFPC teams for the first time, is where I went and bought myself like a prime quarterback, like a Justin Herbert, an Aaron Rodgers, a guy that can, put up the numbers I need no matter who I'm going up against, a la Mahomes or Lamar or whoever it is. Right. And that's something that Dan and I have owned teams together a couple of years now. And it's just not, tight end and tight end premium was something with Kelsey and Kittle. Obviously, that became, I think, more important because it gave you that edge. And I feel like quarterback, as much as we say there's so many and it's so deep, it does matter who you have at QB, doesn't it? So how does this coming up class affect how you manage your quarterbacks in Superflex?
Yeah, I mean, me, I'm all in on the quarterbacks and Superflex. We got into a Goats vs. Pros league this year, and it was an auction league, and I blew, I think, 50% of my budget on Kyler Murray and Dak Prescott, and that was working well for me up until Dak went down. So, I'm willing to go all in on my quarterbacks and Superflex leagues. In terms of this year's draft class and the character of it, there's a lot of hype around Trevor Lawrence, and it is justified. Trevor Lawrence, 6'6", 210. He was the number 1 quarterback recruit coming out of college, and I'm going to make that point very intentionally because I'll follow up with another guy here in a second. Really, really high tape grade for me. Arm strength off the charts, fantastic mechanics, very comfortable in the pocket. I don't want to sell him as a running quarterback, but he is athletic enough to move the pocket. He's athletic enough to adjust to today's NFL because being a stiff guy, a statue in the pocket, it's not going to get it done. Trevor Lawrence, a lot of folks, the cliche is the best, and JD, I know this will get you excited. The cliche is the best prospect since Andrew Luck at the quarterback position. And some go even further and say the best quarterback prospect we've ever seen. That's heavy weight to put on a guy, so I'm not doing that. And he's not perfect. There's mental processing, there's decision-making, things that need to get tightened up. But remember, this guy, he's almost got a folklore to him. He took over the starting job as a true freshman from Kelly Bryant at Clemson. And if you remember at the time, it was a highly controversial decision. Kelly Bryant had just led Clemson to a national title run. Trevor Lawrence comes in, steals the job 3 weeks into his freshman year, and takes Clemson to the Natty, comes back to the college football playoff as a sophomore. He's a really well-rounded, experienced quarterback. And so he is a coveted 101 in Superflex leagues. But one thing I've been trying to really push out here is the guy that's behind him, Justin Fields, who is the solid QB2 for me, is not as far behind as a lot of folks are making him out to be. 6'2", 223 out of Ohio State. Now, I mentioned Trevor Lawrence was the top recruit in his class. Justin Fields was number 2, and both of them actually played high school in Georgia at the same time. So they've always kind of been riding with one another. Fields a much different path. Originally had committed to Georgia, didn't work out there. Transferred to Ohio State. We saw a good breakout year from him last year, and I think this year he's just helped elevate his draft stock. A better arm than Trevor Lawrence. Both really strong arms, though, 50, 55 yards down the field. Justin Fields has some of the best mechanics in this class. Great touch on his ball. At times, he leads his receivers beautifully, but mental processing, decision-making is a much, much bigger weakness for him compared to Trevor Lawrence. It's going to be a problem for any college quarterback, but Justin Fields, at times, it looks like the game is just a little bit too quick for him. Still, though, he is a locked and loaded QB2. He very well could be the second overall pick in this year's NFL draft. Most draft classes, he would be the number 1 overall pick. And then you're going to get a little bit of a teardrop. You're going to get guys like Trey Lance, Zach Wilson, Trey Lance out of North Dakota State, Zach Wilson out of BYU. Some of these guys with huge upside ceilings, especially Trey Lance, the guy with the big arm and the mobility for NDSU. And so that's going to be a little bit of a teardrop. And then you have one more tier that I would say really is kind of letting itself, showing its hand right now, which is I think the backup quarterbacks, but guys who have a chance to be starters at some point in the NFL, guys like Mac Jones, guys like Kyle Trask, and then some high upside picks like Jamie Newman out of Wake Forest, who decided to opt out for this season. So that's what I mentioned, the depth of this quarterback class. It's going to be a little bit deeper than what we saw last year, and there's talent at the top. But a lot of this, of course, is going to play out and show itself a little bit more here as we get into the Senior Bowl, we get into the Combine, and start to see some of these things play out.
Interesting. Guys, anything to ask on the quarterbacks or to discuss before we move?
Who do you have as your number 3 right now, Matt?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's close, and I really kind of struggled back and forth with this. For me, it is Trey Lance. He's my number 3 right now. So Trey Lance, if you're not familiar with him, I try not to skip over some of these guys because sometimes I get stuck in my head, like I've been hearing this name for a while, but remembering that might be a new name for a lot of folks. But Trey Lance plays for North Dakota State, which is actually a FCS team. But he's 6'3", 220. The NFL has made it clear that they don't care that he's playing for FCS. They believe he's a pro-ready and a legitimate prospect. Huge arm. But on top of the huge arm, he's got a ton of mobility to him as well. I don't like player comps at all, but you see a little bit of Josh Allen in Trey Lance's game in the fact that he can really run the ball. And he doesn't scramble. He's not Kyler Murray. He's willing to lower his head and take a linebacker on, which the NFL probably isn't going to love, right? But it pays off at the goal line when he ends up being your goal line back like Josh Allen. So, but Trey Lance, he's a project. He's had one full season of college football. And then North Dakota State played literally one game this year. They scheduled one game because of COVID. So in that 1 year, we saw a real uncomfortableness in the pocket from Trey Lance, and we saw some serious mechanical issues. So he is a guy that needs to ride the pine for a year. He's got to develop, and I hope he ends up in a situation where they really let him do that. Let him sit behind Big Ben in Pittsburgh for a year, and then he comes out with great weapons. There's a lot of Trey Lance to New England talk going on. That could be a good fit. Chicago. There's a lot of spots where Trey Lance, I think, could be a real impact player. Detroit, I was just thinking about that earlier. You put him in Detroit, let Matt Stafford have one more year, and then send that guy out and please save his career and let him try to make a playoff run somewhere. There's a lot of options for where Trey Lance can go. So he's a huge high ceiling guy. And Zach Wilson being my QB4, he's not too far down. But as much as Zach Wilson shows some awesome flashes on tape, great arm strength, great pocket awareness, good mobility, that man is a gunslinger in every definition of the word, in the best way, in the worst way. He has no fear when he throws that ball. And I think his adjustment to the NFL, it's going to be a long developmental curve coming from BYU.
You mentioned receiver. It's a good year, and we know how deep it is. We know how accessible and available they are at that position, especially with all the goodness we got this year with this year's class. But if I go to tight end, me personally, I'm not one to draft a rookie tight end. And if anything, I rather wait until the tight end's proven himself and pay a bit more and know what I'm getting versus like invest and wait and waste, roster spots and all that. Now, do I need to change that approach going into this year's? You mentioned how there's a bounce back with tight ends, or is this like if you like tight end, you like drafting tight end, this is a good year for you to maybe build the depth at that position?
Yeah, there's a couple names at the top this year that are grabbing a lot of people's attention. So those three guys are going to be Kyle Pitts out of Florida, Brevin Jordan out of Miami, and then Pat Freiermuth out of Penn State. Kyle Pitts, 6'5", 240. He really has been the Florida offense. Everyone's so excited about Kyle Trask and his run. A lot of that has been supported by athletic playmakers like Kyle Pitts. Now, Pitts this year, actually, for me, he doesn't grade out very well as a tight end. He's not interested in blocking. He gets driven off the ball by SEC DBs. But if you consider him and look at him as a wide receiver, he has the athleticism, the speed, the acceleration that makes him a really, really attractive option for fantasy football players. And he's getting a lot of hype from what I'm seeing. Even in non-premium tight end leagues, I'm hearing people, put him in that 105, 106 conversation. But, JD, to exactly what you said, even athletic playmaking, high upside type tight ends like this, you have to be careful and you have to manage expectations. Remember how excited we got about Noah Fant? And I'm excited about Noah Fant. I'm still excited about him. But in terms of fantasy football, it's hard to be consistently there for the tight end position. So I'm okay with having Kyle Pitts on my team, but that's a situation where I'm hoping he's sitting there at the 112 for me or the 111. And he is sitting right now at 12 on my rookie big board. I have all these guys ranked out. I'm embarrassed to say how many guys I have on my big board right now. It's about 125 guys. So, which Dan, I need to send you access because you say you're taking all these notes. I think I might just need to get you access over here because I got all the notes here.
There we go. But I'll definitely take that.
Right there at 12, and that's the highest graded tight end for me. And so I don't want to go any higher than that. But I love Brevin Jordan out of Miami. I think he is that Evan Ingram type tight end, athletic, speed and acceleration. Really kind of has more of a refined route running ability. Is interested in being a blocker, contributing for an NFL team in the run block and pass block as well. But he's probably going to slip into your second round, that 205 to 209 type territory. That's the value I want because I think Brevin Jordan could be a real impactful fantasy football guy. It might take a couple years, but if you're paying the 209, it doesn't feel as bad to wait a couple years as if you're paying that 105 and you're passing on one of these really talented wide receivers.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, and the thing is, you're talking about Pitts. It sounds like you would be ideal if, to me, a guy like that situation is going to matter a lot. Like where he goes, what kind of offense he's going to be in. Because if you put a guy like him out, as essentially a big slot receiver, where he doesn't need to worry about the blocking or any of that kind of stuff, he can contribute almost immediately, a la, like an Evan Ingram. So that's the kind of situation where I'd be looking to, if I was, here's me talking about Kyle Pitts. I know nothing about him other than what you've told me. But a player with a description like that, that's somebody where I'm like, okay, yeah, if he gets into the right situation, I would definitely bump him up my draft board. And if not, because Fant, I think if you'd put him on the right offense, he would have probably broke out a lot sooner than what he has. But he's been dealing with all kinds of quarterback problems. Locke is still in a very developmental place.
He is who we thought he was.
Yes. And, in fairness, he's surrounded by a lot of good weapons there in Denver too. Which is, good on them for, trying to give Locke every chance to succeed. But it makes it a little bit tougher on Fant to really, truly break out.
Yeah, you're exactly right. The example I keep giving is, if you put Kyle Pitts in Arizona, like, my goodness, a team that normally would overlook the tight end position, but he's not a tight end. He's really not. And actually, to that point, Dan, one thing I'm doing this year, and this is the third year that I've done this grading system, and really gone through. I have a fantasy football specific formula that I put in when I grade all of these guys, and the weights, the categories are really what helps fantasy football. And I realized that one of the things I've done in the past is put too much investment in the position itself that a player has played in college. And I know that sounds a little weird, but a guy like Antonio Gibson, I let him fall way too far off my board because I cared about, is he a wide receiver? Is he a running back? And I have about 6 guys on my big board this year, and Kyle Pitts is that number one guy where I actually don't have him classified as a tight end. I have him graded out in a different formula for athlete, kind of similar to the way that some guys get recruited out of high school as athletes. And I'm going to let the NFL on, draft night, when they call Kyle Pitts' name, they could tell me if he's a tight end or a wide receiver or how they're going to use him. But in the meantime, really focusing on some of those raw traits, because you're right. We could talk till we're blue in the face about whether Kyle Pitts can put his hand in the dirt and drive somebody back. But if that NFL team isn't going to ask him to do that, why are we wasting our time evaluating those traits that he's not going to be asked to do? So, that's exactly, the right approach to take is like, let's proceed with a little bit of caution with some of these guys where it's going to really depend the scheme they're playing in.
All right, guys, anything to finish this Devy, Matt Hicks, DFF educator segment?
I would like to ask one question, which is on wide receivers. I mean, obviously, we're talking about a very deep group, but who is the one or two guys that you think are going to surprise people with how high they get drafted?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So just to clarify, in the NFL, like on draft night?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So one guy that I don't think enough folks are talking about, I'm going to try to skip past the first round guys because there's some, or I should say, first round rookie guys. Some of the guys you might see in the second round of your rookie draft that I think are going to go higher, and that, my attention is really locked in on. The first one is Chris Olave out of Ohio State, 6'0", 185, really fast in short space, athletic, really sticky hands. I really like Chris Olave. He's had a really productive year there for Ohio State. And I think he's just going to be the next guy coming out of Ohio State that is a really productive wide receiver. I think he sneaks into that high day 2 territory, like one of the first 5 or 6 names called on that second day of the NFL draft in the second round. That's a name that I'm tracking. I'm trying to keep him high up. He's my wide receiver 6 right now. And we just talked about how talented this class is. Another wide receiver is out on the West Coast, Amon-Ra St. Brown at a USC. One of the big tips that I love to give to dynasty players, locking in on the rookie drafts, those looking at the big board, following along, keep an eye on these West Coast guys because people like to snooze on the Pac-12. It tends to not get the primetime games. You don't watch them as much live. When degenerates like me are tweeting out the video clips about them, it's usually late at night. You're burnt out. You're over it. Nobody cares what's happening on the West Coast at 11 o'clock at night. But Amon-Ra St. Brown has been a critical part of this USC offense. 6'1", 195, super athletic, super fluid type guy, very, very consistent hands. And I think he's got the athleticism and the well-rounded skill set, good route runner that the NFL is really going to appreciate. Again, I think a high day 2 type pick. And then I'll just give you one more name. We talked about, that next running back group up. And for me right now, my running back 3, and I know some folks are in my camp on this, but I'm on a little bit of an island right now on this, but I love Javion Hawkins out of Louisville. 5'9", 196, really, really fast guy, good speed, great acceleration, ridiculous contact balance. When I talked about loving contact balance earlier, it's something I really care about. Excellent change of direction ability, excellent vision. For Hawkins, the knock that you're going to hear on him a lot is that he's undersized because he originally, when he came to Louisville, he was a $150, guys, no lie. Listed on the website, a $150 as a freshman. He's leaving Louisville 45 pounds up, weighed in at 195, and I wouldn't be surprised if at the combine he's somewhere in that 190 to 195 weight range. And he is strong and he is yoked up. The only knock you're going to hear against Javion Hawkins, and you have to be careful about this. This is one of the things that I love to talk about. He doesn't have the pass catching numbers. So if you're a box score guy, if you're looking at those stats, and there's nothing wrong with the analytics and the stat side of this, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with this, but keep in mind that the scheme that Javion Hawkins played in doesn't have a lot of stats in pass catching. All Louisville does is run the ball. It's run first scheme. They have a mobile quarterback. That's all they ask their players to do. And when they do throw the ball, they have two really talented guys who are in this year's draft class, in Fitzpatrick and Tutu Atwell. And so when they were throwing the ball, they were throwing to one of those two guys instead of their running back. But don't ever knock a prospect for not doing something they weren't asked to do.
I was going to ask you if it had to do with talent or the scenario, right?
Exactly, yeah, exactly. So Hawkins is my 3. Hawkins, Olave, Amon-Ra, St. Brown. You got to cut me off because I can name these names for an hour here. So I'll stick.
Whoa, boy, whoa. All right, we'll go to a little commercial. Let Matt cool off a bit. All right, guys, you see it on the screen. Look, Salvation Army, they usually, you probably see them, they're in the Walmart entrance, the liquor store, collecting money for those in need. And because of COVID, obviously this year, they can't do that. So we teamed up with Veridian, our partners who sell our goat gear, and True North. I'm rocking I'm showing it like I'm on the screen, but I've got my True North shirt on. There you go. Here. And we're just any holiday sweaters. I don't want to say ugly sweaters because I kind of like them, but I'm still waiting for mine to show up. They're on the way, but yeah, I mean, it's you get yourself a nice sweater you can wear to your virtual Christmas party or virtual family Christmas or whatever you're doing this year. Here we're maxed out at, I think, 5 people per household, so it's going to be an odd one, but. Go get yourself a holiday sweater. All the proceeds go to the Salvation Army. That's what we've, anything that goes to those sweaters we're going to sell. And any goat gear that you, like I said earlier, that you get on Veridian, there's a ton of podcasts that I'm sure you listen to now who have gear on there. Go support them as well. And tag us on any goat gear you get. Like I said, you'll get entered into one of these FFPC contests to win an FFPC playoff challenge entrance, which is you got a chance to win either $500,000 or $100,000, which I don't know about you, but my wife will be pretty happy. She might even throw this toucan and get a little puck. No, I'm just kidding. All right, guys, we're gonna move into waiver wire. We're gonna go over to Theo, the OG. I love your handle, by the way. That's just magic.
It works.
Dan had to spell it out because I'm French and half not too bright, but I'm like, what's the OG's name again? He's like, well, I think if you put the and oh yeah, Theo, yeah, that's right. All right, I remember now.
There you go.
But, no, man, look, you're a beast when it comes to waivers, and I know for our FFPC listeners, that is still that's the lifeline. That's what gets you to where you're at now if you're still playing for that nice money on the FFPC. So. Why don't you start this conversation on who are guys that you're maybe targeting on the waiver wire or anything else related to that right now?
Well, if you're still playing for anything significant this time of year, you're no doubt starting a couple guys you picked up on the waiver wire. I know Tanyan's been a big help to a lot of people at tight end this year. Jefferson, Claypool. There's plenty of guys that have been plugged in.
Gallman.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Gallman was big time, tons of weeks. Mike Davis, a lot of people got him on the waiver wire.
Mm-hmm.
I know Robinson in our league was undrafted because, we drafted early. If you drafted a little closer to the season, he was picked up. But, he's been a, unbelievable pickup. So it's been actually a very great year for waiver wire pickups. And I think that, you saw last week, a lot of home leagues, Cam Akers was a waiver wire pickup, and he just ran wild. This week, there's not really one huge standout. The person I would be targeting is Jeff Wilson. We talked about it a little bit on the intro, but he's got a very positive matchup against Dallas this week. I mean, that Dallas defense is just could get shredded at home. The 49ers are a favorite. And I think that Wilson is a tremendous play if Mostert misses. But if Mostert plays, I still think Wilson could be a flex play. He found the end zone last week. The 49ers are running the ball 40% of the time. They're really, really looking to hammer it, and they're down a number of weapons. Kittle sounds like he might come back, but I think if he does, it's going to be week 16. And it looks like Debo is going to be out. So you're really looking at Brandon Ayuk, who's been tremendous. But after that, they're going to really look to pound the rock and really get after Dallas. And I think that's a game that San Francisco should control. So I would spend, if you have Fab left, I would go for Jeff Wilson. I think that's the kind of guy that could really give you a nice 2-week run here.
Dallas, number 32 team defense versus rushing yards per game.
It's awful. It's just awful.
Right?
I mean, everybody's running the ball in Dallas.
Yeah, we all saw him on Thursday night a couple weeks ago against the Ravens, where their linebackers are just completely misdiagnosing the plays, and just leaving gaping holes open. And that's been going on every single week for Dallas, every single week.
Yeah, I know Wilson's the kind of guy that it's always you always have these kind of no-name running backs that end up making a real impact towards the end of the fantasy season, and I really think Wilson could be the guy. I think that people still think of the committee approach in San Francisco, but with the amount of times they're running the football, I think that it's a no-brainer ad this week. I mean, after that, at running back, it really dries up. DeAndre Washington's probably still going to get another start this week. Last week, he had 72% of the rushes for Miami, but obviously they're playing Kansas City, and that was a game where they had to keep up. So it really was he had about 13 rushes, and he would be a very low-end play if you really, really were stuck at running back. But as we saw last week, New England certainly got shredded by Cam Akers, so that run defense should not scare anybody. If you're in a real jam, you could use DeAndre Washington. And that's pretty much it at running back. There's a number of guys at wide receiver this week, and I know one guy, especially for dynasty players, that should be of interest is Lynn Bowden. There you go.
I thought you were going to go GD out in Buffalo.
Oh, no. I mean,
Matt's getting excited over there.
I have Gabriel Davis rostered everywhere. I mean,
talk about Bowden though, because that's an interesting one, right? Rookie who gets traded in the middle of his first. I don't even. When I heard that, I was like, does that even happen? I've never even heard of that.
No, they wanted him to play running back, and they draft. Obviously he had played quarterback at Kentucky last year, and he led the SEC in rushing, and Las Vegas had this idea that he was going to be able to plug him in as kind of a do-it-all running back, and it just didn't work out. He's had a little bit of off-the-field issues, and Miami smartly made a trade for him and put him at slot receiver, and it's looking like a hit. So the guy is coming off a 7-catch game, 82 yards last week against KC, and I mean, he was a huge part of their offense last week. I mean, Gesicki had a monster game, but Bowden was consistently helping move the sticks, and I think that's kind of a role he's settling in at. The whole wide receiver core in Miami is banged up, and Bowden kind of has a little bit of juice. And one stat that kind of stood out was the New England Patriots are the third worst pass defense when they're defending the slot. So they're really getting shredded by the slot, and you're not going to see Gilmore on Bowden. I think he's going to have another positive matchup this week. The game should be a little bit lower scoring, but if you're in a jam, I think Bowden could be it. He's a guy that dynasty teams should really consider. It seems like he's kind of settling in, and that offense should be looking a little bit better next year with Tua settling in at the quarterback position. So I'm excited about Lynn Bowden. I'm sure that Matt had some ideas about him in college. He was an interesting prospect, and I think this is kind of a good fit for him. And then Gabriel Davis, I mean, if you have a chance to get Gabriel Davis at this point, I know that pretty much every competitive league he's going to be rostered. I know that all the dynasty leagues we play in, he's been rostered for a long time. But, I mean, I am very, very impressed by Gabriel Davis. I mean, that's a guy that's scoring or making a big play every week. He's had a couple of touchdowns called back on penalties, and that Buffalo offense is just humming. I know they get John Brown back, but Gabriel Davis to me is he's just a level above. And I I think that next year he's the kind of guy that could really, really improve. And I mean, redraft-wise, dynasty-wise, that's a guy that I will be targeting next year for sure, because I think that there's a good chance John Brown's not a Bill next year. You know, he's getting older, and Davis just looks like a no-brainer as the number 2 wideout in Buffalo next year.
Yeah, that's a good point. I was just really quick on Brown. Like, do you think now is the time to buy, or do you think because John Brown comes back and maybe Gabriel gets pushed back on the depth chart, maybe that's when you kind of pounce, or it doesn't matter because of the price, right? It's kind of super cheap at this point.
I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, I know Brown's coming back, but he's had a number of injuries this year, and I'm not sure how the offense is going to look. To me, Gabriel Davis has played behind Brown, but it's kind of hard to put that back in the box. I mean, we've seen Davis make big plays every single week that Brown is out. And, you know, they do run 4 wide receiver sets a good amount. I don't think either one of those guys is going to disappear. But if it's me, Davis is the kind of guy that should have a role that would keep expanding as we get into the NFL playoffs. Because, I mean, I think he's the real deal. I think he's a really good player. I know Dan, you're a fan of his as well.
Yeah, definitely. You know, he's a fun guy to watch, and you know, you can just you can see that he gets it. You know, and you can see the progression throughout the course of the year of how he's, you know, understanding more of what he needs to be doing within the offense. And I agree. I think, you know, he's going to be one of those guys, you know, that even if you end up paying, you know, what seemed like an overpay for him, you know, by this time next year, you probably won't be thinking it was an overpay anymore. Almost no matter what you pay, you know, like you could pay a low first for him, and he might be extremely happy you did that by this time next year.
Talking GD, man? You talking GD?
Yeah, Gabriel Davis.
I just got him for $27 FFPC, son, and I got Diggs on that team. So now all I need is Allen for next year. You know, just saying.
Get that nice stack, big time stack.
So Matt, I know you're like Matt. I'm not wrong here. You're the GD guy, right? Like your face has been like popping at the screen ever since the name came up. So just unleash, bro. Just unleash.
This was my guy, man. Gabriel Davis is the reason that I love doing all this research and watching all this tape, because I got him in the third, fourth. I have like an 85, 90% rostering him, you know, across all my leagues. He was so cheap, and I just did not understand it for a second. His college tape was outstanding. He came in with strong draft capital, you know, for the fact that he was a group of 5 guy coming out of UCF. And then it was like this all offseason. What did we say? Oh, man, we need to get a field stretcher for Josh Allen. We need to get a field stretcher. And then Gabriel Davis lands there, and I'm like, guys, this is what we wanted. Hello. And everyone just ignored him. And so, you know, the value of getting Gabriel Davis, this is why you do all the research, right? Like the value of getting Gabriel Davis in the 4th round, it hits way more return and is going to over the next couple of years than whoever you drafted at 105. You know, even if they are a really good player, the cost versus return is ridiculous. And, you know, there's countless examples of this, but I love Gabriel Davis, man. He's clearly been a fit in the offense. And what I love is watching Buffalo play. They are doing whatever they can to get him involved. Early on, they were giving him some direct snaps. They're moving him all around the field. They clearly are interested. And when you see that chemistry with a young wide receiver and his quarterback, you know, you can't overvalue that. He already trusts him. I'm excited, dude. This is a guy, his value is only going to go up as this Buffalo offense, you know, clicks more and more.
What did they call the Rams back in the day? What's that? What do they call them again?
Greatest show on turf.
Like, who the fuck would have thought that the Bills would be launching the ball like they did? I put a tweet that I'll talk about later, and Stephon Diggs literally on all of my rosters where I'm fighting for a trophy right now. And it's because, you know, I'm not going to play like, oh, I knew this was going to happen. It's just when the hate that was coming on Diggs when he went to Buffalo with that talent, you almost had to say, like, I cannot sell here. So it's paying off right now, right? And Theo, you talk about Miami. I mean, talk about the new Patriots of the 2020. That team is just looking good all around. Like just the depth, coaching. Like I just want any part of that right now that I can get. And that's, you talk about a cheap piece. That's definitely a cheap piece that people might disregard. Think he's a rookie. He already got traded. So I love that. Dan, you got anyone that you're chomping at the bits right now? I know you're still in those waiver wire. We got a couple of waiver wires that we're working on together.
Oh man,
I'm not going to say that we're fighting for the 101, but
Well, no, and we got to be careful not to give Theo too many hints since we're playing against him this week. So,
there you go.
But since the waiver wire time has passed, but no, actually, I have the 1250 dynasty I'm in. I have the number 2 seed, and I am scrambling on the waiver wire this week because I had Mostert and I had Ronald Jones, and those were two. I was counting on at least one of them. Filling a big hole in my lineup, and then Hayden Hurst is just like completely tanked the past few weeks. So all of a sudden I have this team where I'm like, trying to scramble to patch holes. One of the players I picked up was Rashard Higgins out of Cleveland. And, it's just an example of, this is a guy who's working right now. He's working within that offense. He's filling a valuable role, and Baker Mayfield is looking to him. You throw out those 3 games they played in Cleveland a little bit earlier this year with just terrible weather, and it made Baker look like a terrible quarterback, and the Browns look like a terrible team. And you're thinking this passing game is just never going to get unstuck, but it has gotten unstuck in the past couple weeks, and Higgins is one of those reasons because he's kind of opening things up a little bit more. And, so you got Higgins, you got Peoples-Jones. To me, Higgins is a little bit more reliable, but, he's a guy you can just grab off the waiver wire in a lot of leagues and plug in there, and he's probably going to do pretty decent. Kendrick Bourne with Deebo Samuel out, he's a good pickup. He's not gonna get you 20 points or anything like that. But if you need a guy who you can throw in there and, get me 10 points, please, he's probably a pretty good bet for that. You could also go with Jordan Reed as well, especially in tight end premium. He's a little bit more up or down, but, if you're looking for that 15 plus play, Jordan Reed's probably going to give you that a little bit more than Kendrick Bourne. And then beyond that, it's starting to get a little bleak out there. Theo went through several good people, but beyond that, there's just not a whole lot else.
I had Higgins actually as one of my wide receivers. I think that's a great pickup, and I think that Week 16 matchup against the Jets could just be the Browns just unloading on them. I mean, this week, he's a little bit more of a floor play, but he had 10 targets last game. I think he scored in back-to-back games, and he was a big waiver wire pickup early in the year when Odell went down, and we kind of waited. But he's always had great chemistry with Baker Mayfield, and I would absolutely be excited to use him next week against the Jets. A couple of guys that might not that would be rostered in our leagues, but in some home leagues might still be available. Nelson Aguilar is a obviously a boom bust type guy, but they have a very high total this week against the Chargers on Thursday.
He should win comeback player of the year, man. Forget it.
He's like he's gone from like a punchline to a wide receiver 3.
And he's the reason I stopped drafting receivers in the first round of a rookie draft because of Aguilar. Him and Patterson.
Oh man, yeah. Remember some of those drops in Philly? I mean, the guy's he's one of those guys you kind of laugh off when he signs, but I mean, he's had so many of these games. He had 100 yards last week, and he had another touchdown. And Ruggs is out, so he might see a few more downfield targets, and the Chargers can absolutely be scored on. And again, it's a 55-point total. So, I mean, if you're absolutely in a jam, that's the kind of guy you go to. In our leagues, Tim Patrick will be rostered, but he's available in some home leagues. He's looking like a decent option. The guy is getting, 12 points PPR, that kind of, floor play. And then if you want to go deeper, Chad Hansen has had 2 back-to-back good games. I mean, I think he's a wide receiver 4, but that might be helpful if you're in a jam. The Texans are reeling, and they really need receiving help. And Hansen he's done it. He had 5 catches for 101 yards 2 weeks ago against the Colts, who he's playing this week. And last week he followed up with 7 catches for 56 yards. The Bears kind of took away QT, so it was a little bit more of throwing to Hansen because he's open. But he's a compiler that can get you 10 points, kind of like the Kendrick Bourne play. So it's not a great week, but if you have to scrap by, you got to scrap by. And there's some pretty okay names at wide receiver. And then another name at tight end that might be available in some home leagues is Irv Smith. Kyle Rudolph's going to be out. Irv is rostered in all of our FFPC leagues, but in a lot of home leagues, Irv is the kind of guy you can plug in. The Bears have been pretty weak against the tight end position, and I think Irv has a chance to have a decent game this week.
Sorry, go ahead, Dan. Go ahead.
I was just going to mention one other one that, in deeper leagues, he's probably already been snapped up, but in shallower leagues, Russell Gage for Atlanta. If Julio's not playing, Gage is absolutely a playable asset. And right now, he's been kind of taking those targets away from Hayden Hurst, who was doing better earlier in the year. And now the offense is kind of flipped over where they're running a little bit more 11 personnel, and Gage is getting on the field a little bit more and is definitely getting those targets. And with Julio out, he's definitely worthwhile. He got I think 19 points last week or something like that. And, so they're going against Tampa. They're probably going to be behind and probably going to be throwing the ball around a little bit.
Gage is very fun. He's also, they'll line him up at Wildcat QB, and he threw a touchdown last week to Calvin Ridley.
Right.
And he's always got that threat. I think he's at 2 touchdown passes for the season. And, like you said, that Tampa game, that could be a tough one for them. And they're really running out of weapons in Atlanta. So Gage definitely has a floor. One other player would be Cole Kmet, which is also an interesting guy for dynasty leagues. He's kind of coming on for Chicago. He had 4 catches for 41 yards last week. I think that he's more of a high-end tight end too, but it's a mess of a position, and you have to go with what you've got. Kmet is interesting to me in dynasty. I actually am trying to get a little bit of Kmet on my teams. I think that he could step up a little bit and have a little bit more of a role next year. He had to compete with Jimmy Graham this year, but I think that next year he could be more of a featured tight end for Chicago. And then the other player who we talked about, Gabriel Davis, but another rookie wide receiver who in this tremendous class is going a little bit unnoticed that I'm trying to roster on as many dynasty teams as possible is Darnell Mooney. It's looking to me like Allen Robinson is not going to get re-signed. And I think Darnell Mooney is the kind of guy that could be a wide receiver 1 and obviously a lower end wide receiver 1, but a wide receiver 1 with speed, the ability to separate. And, I think next year there's a chance he could be a wide receiver 2 based on volume, and he has some talent. Matt, I'm sure you had some thoughts about Darnell Mooney coming out of Tulane.
Yeah, Mooney was an under-the-radar guy, but I think we've seen, for good reason, why he's kind of popped out a little bit this year. And I've been slowly accumulating him. He's somebody that I'd missed on through the rookie drafts. He was another guy you could have gotten in the 4th round, and he was just not high enough on my radar. But been buying him cheap all this year, and I think you're exactly right. The trajectory is up with his value because somebody's going to give Allen Robinson the bag this offseason.
The Green Bay Packers.
Chicago.
Oh, man.
That would be wild. Hey, we could send him over here to Baltimore.
Yeah,
Robinson
would be a great fit there.
No one to throw him the ball, though. Who the hell's going to throw him the ball? You?
Oh, you stop that.
Just saying. Glad I said.
Oh, get yourself in trouble.
All right. I can't believe that out of all that, my 2 guys are still there on the list. They're still on the board. I'm walking up. I feel so proud. But this is I don't know, waiver. I don't like to spend a lot on waivers. So I go low, man. I'm going Adam Shaheen out there in Miami with my boy Gesicki. Trade Addicts 5. I just took out Outhouse in the first round of the playoffs, even though I lost Gesicki. Sorry, Russ, I had to poke in there. But he's trying to trade me Kelsey. Dan, I talked to you about this trade. He wants like a bunch of firsts and this and that. But I got Shaheen on my bench, man. He put up 16 points 1 week. And, obviously, Tua's thrown to the tight end. So
no, Shaheen is definitely not a bad dart throw. No? I always liked Shaheen in his Chicago days. I always thought that he was the kind of tight end that could pop. He had an athletic profile. And it just never sort of happened there. And, he's one of those guys that, you sit and you watch Red Zone and he makes a big play for Miami here and there, and now he'll have an opportunity. So that's definitely not a bad name.
The Miami Patriots, man. All right. And my last one, going to the running back position. And if you own the train, I call him the train because he's literally a train, Derrick Henry, how do you not have Jeremy McNichols right now on your roster? Because he might, he's just a name, even when he was back in Tampa. He's just one of those guys I like having on my taxi squad or on the, on the end of my bench in the running back position. But let's face it, man, Derrick Henry is just steaming up the league. Shit happens at that position, And this is a team that is planning on going far in the playoffs. So even if you're not contending and you can pick up that McNichols, just, while it's hasn't gained value yet, pick it up. Who knows? You just drop him in the offseason. That's how you pick up guys like, Damian Williams or whatever, Ecklers and all that kind of stuff is by picking up the right guy at the right time. And I think McNichols right now is almost a freebie.
Yeah, you're laying out a nightmare scenario for many Derrick Henry.
I don't want to
Henry teams.
Yeah, no doubt.
But yes, if Derrick Henry goes down this week, or they decide to shelve him for Week 16 in the fantasy championship week, then McNichols could be the guy. He definitely could be.
So, all right, here's my dilemma. I'll throw this out there to you guys. We'll do pick my shitty tight end, okay?
I love Dan's new segment. We need a drop.
Yes, that's right. All right, so here's the deal. This is an auction league. I was rolling with Gesicki, which was great. I had Kyle Rudolph and Irv Smith. I ended up dropping Irv Smith a couple weeks ago because he just wasn't doing anything, and I needed to pick somebody up in a different spot. And of course, Kyle Rudolph looked great because Irv Smith was hurt. Now it's the other way around, and now Gesicki's hurt. So I have three crappy options. I have Dan Arnold for Arizona, Adam Shaheen for Miami, and Dawson Knox for Buffalo. And all I care about is this week. Who you guys taking?
You said it's Dan Arnold, Shaheen, and Knox.
Yep.
Don't.
I might go Dan Arnold in that spot.
Yep.
It would be him or Shaheen for me. I just don't trust Dawson Knox. I think that the tight end usage in Buffalo is it's very hard to predict. I would probably go Arnold. It seems like Kyler Murray likes him a little bit. The problem with Arnold is he doesn't play enough snaps, but he's a touchdown threat. And Murray definitely trusts him. And I think that that's a game where they're 7-point favorite. And our guy, Chase Edmonds, looks like he's going to miss the game. So that might open up a couple of extra targets for Arnold. I would go Arnold.
All right. I like it. I like it. Theo and I are thinking the same thing. The order I had them in was Arnold, Shaheen, and Knox. So you and I are simpatico here. I like it. That gives me a little bit more confidence.
Matt, you got anything to add on that? I'm trying to.
I was working through that in that same order there. Shaheen is interesting, but New England's allowed the third least fantasy points to tight ends this season, so that would kind of rule it out. I'm a huge Dawson Knox fan, as a prospect, and I do think that he's only going to go up. But you're right, Theo, in terms of the usage, it's not consistent enough there in Buffalo. So, gosh, it feels gross as heck, but Dan Arnold, it is actually a pretty decent matchup. I mean, I think Philadelphia has allowed the 8th most fantasy points to tight ends, and if you get one touchdown and one catch out of it, then you're happy, right? So I think that's probably all you're going to get. So it's go with it.
Yeah, I'm just looking for a handful of points. I mean, just something to get me by. And, I'm definitely the type of guy who I don't mind digging through the sludge at the bottom of the dumpster for my tight end, if that's what it takes, and often it is, because I think Matt pointed out something that's very important with tight ends. A lot of times you can take a look. There's usually 2 or 3 defenses that are really bad against tight ends every year, and they just struggle. And you can plug in almost anybody against them, and they're going to do reasonably well. And if you can plug in a tight end that's even halfway decent against them, they'll probably do real well. The Jets are one of those teams this year. They've been just awful against tight end. And I'm trying to think who else is up in that range, but there's a couple other teams that are just absolutely giving it up to the tight ends.
Last year was Arizona was almost automatic. Remember that they had a run where they allowed a touchdown for, I think it was
Cincinnati.
Cincinnati.
Yeah, Cincinnati's terrible against tight end.
Carolina,
Chicago, you mentioned earlier. Yes. Yeah, so there's a few teams that you can just
Arnold has the best matchup, and like you said, Dan, you're looking for 1 week, and that's what you want is the matchup, right? And let's face it, the most firepower out of those 3 offenses, which let's face it, tight end, if they're not getting the volume, and Knox is inconsistent, but if they're red zone targets, that's kind of, you get a touchdown, you're good, you're happy, right, at that tight end.
Yeah, when you're scraping the bottom at tight end, that's what you're looking for. You're looking for that touchdown more often than not, because it's pretty rare that crappy tight end is going to get you, 9 targets, 7 catches, and 63 yards or something like that. That's just very unlikely to happen. You're just looking for that touchdown, the 3 for 23 and a touch. You get that, you're doing fantastic.
Yeah, if you're looking at game pace too, right? You don't want to get caught up with the slow game pace of the Patriots. Right. Arizona, Philly, especially with Hurts, Philly's going to push that game pace, right? That's going to be their only shot. The defense is trash, so it's going to be their only shot is to push the pace of the game. So more red zone, more opportunities. I think everything's pointing that direction.
There you go.
All right, guys, I've got it up on the screen. We talked about it earlier, the FFPC Playoff Challenge. There's 2 of them, and there's 2 different price points. There's 2 different tournaments. A $35 buy-in for the Football Guys Playoff Challenge, which is you're playing for $100,000, guys. Like, how much is your wife going to love you when you win $100,000 and you tell her you put in $35? I mean, you're like, you should be working Wall Street with that magic, no? And then you got $200 for the ballers, Dan, guys with hair like Dan. I mean, they're balling. They're just whipping it out, rocking the $200 roster on the FFPC Challenge. And I say this, like I've been saying it the last few weeks, nothing makes the NFL playoffs, and like they're exciting enough. They're super fun. Nothing makes it more exciting than these 2 tournaments. Dan, am I wrong or am I wrong?
Oh, definitely. These tournaments are super, super exciting. And, they're one of those things where, you get to kind of exercise your DFS brain a little bit because you're going to have to find some contrarian options to probably do well in this tournament. If you're going complete chalk all the way, the odds are you're not going to win the prize, but if you do, you're probably going to be sharing it with several other people. But if you can get 1 or 2 really contrarian options in there, either by backing, there's a couple ways to do it. You can either back a team that a lot of people are picking to exit the playoffs early. If you can find that team that you think everybody is just, absolutely counting out of the playoffs, one and done type thing, and you think they're going to play, 3 games, any player from that team is probably going to help you out. If you can pick the right player, that could be a challenge winner for you right there. And that's one way to differentiate. The other way is to just go, you can do what our good friend Austin did. He and Seth, Austin's been on the Goatcast before, and he won the playoff challenge last year. And he and his co-owner Seth, what they did was
Rich.
Instead of taking Kittle from San Francisco, they took Mostert. and that was all the difference in the world. I mean, that was what won them the playoff, basically. So, it's a ton of fun. If you're looking to enter a bunch and you don't have that much, go for that Football Guys Players Challenge, 35 to enter, throw in 10 or 15 entries at it and just have fun, come up with some fun lineups and see what happens.
100 grand for first, 370,000 in guaranteed prize, paying down to the 1800th place. So even if you ain't that good at this shit, you might win some money. You know what I'm saying? Like Dan said, Dan's just balling. Like just shows you how balling Dan is. Like if you just want to throw like 10 entries, like balling it out there in minutes. No, I'm just joking, man. He's right though, guys. You know what it is? If you won money in your dynasty leagues or in your redraft leagues, this is a good way to kind of reinvest a little portion of that into, maybe some Christmas goodness, some holiday goodness when you win that big money. Or maybe you didn't do well this offseason or this season, and now it gives you the opportunity to kind of – because, look, Dan, the way I saw this the past few years is if I win one of these in a year that I didn't do so well, maybe a down year, it makes up for the whole season, right? Especially if you win one of these big prizes, and it's paying all the way down, like we said, 1800th and 700th for the big tournament. So 700 people are getting money out of that big buy.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and you can still finish a ways down, and still come home with $10,000. That's not a bad payday at all for, just going out there and having a little bit of fun for the playoffs.
Dan, any dollars that I bring home from this from this hobby, I guess we call it, this competitive world that we're in. All right, guys, we're lucky in the sense that we have awesome listeners, and they send us some awesome trade questions. All right, let's start it off with our boy Trader Duck. Trader Duck has been sending some really good trades, and this is actually a good one. So I'm going to go to our guest first. I'm going to go to Theo first on this one. At Trader_Duck, 12-team Dino, Superflex, PPR League. The first side. Everybody grab your pens and papers. Listen up.
Yeah, you're going to be writing for a while.
You will be. Barkley, Edmonds, Hooper, who's maybe coming back from injury, Cortland Sutton, 21 second, 21 third. That's all on one side. The other side has Mr. Chubb, TJ Hawk, Marvin Jones, and a 2022 second. So Chubb, Hawk, Marvin Jones, and a 2022 seconds. On the other side is Barkley, Edmonds, Hooper, Sutton, 21 second, and a 21 third. Matt,
couple thoughts here. He is asking if you're contending, so you got to put yourself in the contender mindset for this one, and also keep tight end premium pointed out.
Forgot to throw that in. Thanks, Dan. Dan, you're awesome. Matt's like that GIF, where he's like calculating up in the air. There's like division symbols and other bunch of shit I don't remember from, first year university calculus.
Can I just say that, first and foremost, if you send me this trade, I'm declining it.
Too much, right?
Because I'm for sending this trade and making me think this hard about the move.
First one of the night, Dan.
I mean, here's the thing. When I look at this trade, when there's so many moving pieces, what I like to do is I like to just look at the best pieces, right? At the end of the day, what am I really getting and what am I really losing? And, if you take contending out of it, I want the side that has Barkley and Sutton because I think those two players are better than Chubb and Hawk, even though I like both of those players. And then you have that bonus second-round pick, which I really like as well. But if you're contending, you can't, at this point in time, if you're making that means you're in the semis at least, right? It's not the time to sell now. You can't take on Barkley and Sutton at this point in time if you're about to make a run and try to make some cash. So I think I would take the Chubb and Hawk side if I'm contending, but otherwise it's the Barkley and Sutton side fairly easily for me.
Yeah, for me, it's the Barkley side. If I'm contending and it's getting the money this year, obviously the Chubb and Hawk side, but Saquon's the best player in this deal. I traded for him in our league with JD and Dan. I gave up DJ Moore and Austin Eckler when he went down, so I gave up a lot to get Saquon, and I'm a big fan of him bouncing back. I know some people disagree with me on that, but I would want to have Saquon in this.
Dan, what do you make of this? I want to say mess, but I like these at the same time. It's
right. Yeah, it does make you think. I mean, you can definitely smell the wood burning and coming out of my ears here. I mean, to me, if I'm contending, that is a lot for me to give up for Chubb, Hawk, and a couple of bargain basement pieces. It would really depend on kind of the circumstances of, do I really think if this deal is going to put me over the top? Is it worth a lot to me to win this league? If so, then I might go ahead and make that deal. It also depends on how much depth you have. Maybe you've got the pieces where you can afford to give all that up and you're still going to be fine. I love Hawkinson moving forward, especially in the tight end premium. But Chubb, Barkley is definitely over Chubb. Even though I'm a little bit worried about him for next year, I think Barkley overall, just the better player. So I would prefer to find a cheaper deal. But again, if you're contending, sometimes you just don't have that many choices, and you have to make hard decisions like this. And you have to decide, how much is this title really worth to me?
Yeah, I think that's it, right? That's the dilemma we have this time of year. And the guys who are not contending, sorry, I don't mean to say the guys, the people who are not contending, they know that they've got you by the what right now. Like I mentioned earlier with Russ Outhouse, I beat him in that first round. Right as soon as we were done that matchup, he sent me an offer offering me Kelce because he knows I lost Gesicki, and he wants like 2 firsts with a Gesicki with this and that. And it's like, you have to decide, how much are you willing to give up, and is it worth it? And are you really, really one of those top 2 or 3 teams out of these teams that are left? Because sometimes we think because we made it through the first round and got lucky, and maybe the other guy had Jacobs and we had Sanders or whatever it was. So you got to be, again, honest with yourself about your team. But for me, this is almost a no-brainer for me. This is definitely the Barkley side. I'm actually surprised that it's this close. It's 58%, 57.9 on the Barkley side, and 42 in Chubb. As soon as my running backs hit 25 guys, they gone. I'm sorry, this is the only position I'm ageist at. Is this position. We talked about it all season on this show. Why? The reasons why you need to start moving your running backs. We saw it again this year. As soon as they hit that 25-year-old mark, there's a very good chance they're going to drop. And look, Chubb is one of my favorite. Him and Carson are 2 of my favorite running backs in this league. They might be top 2 even, as running backs, pure runners. But fantasy-wise, give me the Barkley side. I think Sutton right now is a great buy. Go out there and buy the shit out of him because nobody even remembers who he is. And everybody thinks, Judy's there, Fant is there, everybody's good. I'd go buy some Sutton, but I'm going to take that side of it. Look, it doesn't hurt to get you some Chubb going into the playoffs, right, guys? A little rise in chances to win. No, that was bad. That was horrible. Sorry, guys. Blame it on my French. All right. So the next one we have Fantasy Pollster, 10-team dynasty. This is like an on the clock. That's why I threw it on here, because I have not done on the clock in a really long time. Little OTC action. Theo, do you want Debo or do you want the undervalued, underhyped Bobby Woods?
Well, for me, you're buying the wide receiver 2 in LA with Cup extended, or you're buying the wide receiver 2 in San Francisco with Ayuk. Just to me, Ayuk is the number 1 in San Fran next year. Debo's had a few injury concerns, but you're getting about 3 years younger. I think Debo is about 25 now, almost 25, and Woods is about 28. So that's for me. I would probably take the chance on Debo in a dynasty league. But certainly, if it was a win now, it would be a Woods. But I'm still a fan of Debo. I think that Debo in the right setting is going to be a very effective player next year, assuming that we have a healthy Kittle and Ayuk taking a step up. I think Debo's a nice player long term, but this is a very, very close one. I'm sure if this could go either way for me, but I slightly lean Debo.
Matt, you going youth or you going all wood?
Yeah, I think you said it perfectly with the undervalued Robert Woods. Just the level of consistency that comes with him. And I buy into that Rams offense more. And I'm a big Debo Samuel fan. I loved him coming out, right? And he's definitely still a young guy. You get those years, which can be so valuable in Dynasty. But for me, I've had to really force myself off of this San Francisco offense. And I think we have this perception that it's this high-impact, high-scoring offense. And until they figure out that QB room, it's really not. And so I like Debo a lot. I'm not knocking him. I would take him over a lot of guys right now. But when you have the stability that comes with Robert Woods in that Rams offense, and he's locked up, they gave him that new contract, so he's going to be there. So, I would go with Woods here. It's a tough one though. It's not a slam dunk one way or the other.
Dan, I'll let you go before.
All right. So, yeah, I guess my concern is, are we sure that Woods is going to be back with Los Angeles next year? If I recall, his contract is at a point where he is cuttable. The salary cap is dropping down to $175 million, roughly, is what we think for next year. And anytime the salary cap drops, you got to be concerned about that. So just for those factors, I love me some Bobby Trees, no doubt about it. But I'm going to take Debo here because I do think while Ayuk probably is going to be, more of the field stretcher and all that in San Francisco, I still see Debo doing a lot of the dirty work. I do have the same concerns that Theo has about his durability, especially given the way that he plays, the style of game that he plays. I don't think these injuries are, just going to go away. He plays the game in a style which causes him to put himself in harm's way. And so you got to be worried about that. But I mean, when he's on the field, I think he's rock solid. So I would go Debo here, just basically because of my slight uncertainty with the Rams salary cap issues. And then also, getting 3 years younger is always great in Dynasty.
This is simple for me. Dynasty-wise, these guys have similar value. It just depends on what kind of owner you are. If you're more, draft my team, make little tweak adjustment moves here and there, Bobby Woods is going to outproduce his value on the market. Whereas Debo, dynasty-wise, and obviously upside, possible trade, I guess, opportunities is definitely in Debo's side. So if this year is a factor, I definitely lean Woods. Otherwise, I'm going to go Debo just because he's a more movable piece. I love me some Debo, man. Debo and Miles Sanders are my two most owned players. I guess after Diggs. Diggs is probably the guy I own the most right now for some reason. But I think I'm surprised by how big of a lead Bobby Woods gets in this poll with 64.6% versus Debo. And I think it's, we see Ayuk popping right now, that new shiny toy out there in San Fran. And usually like the tiebreaker for me, I'm going to look at the coaches, but damn, they're both good, in LA and in San Fran. So that doesn't really break the tie there. Guys, we're going to finish it off with this. I threw a tweet out there. Sometimes they do well. Sometimes they do aight. This one, you guys seemed interested in answering. I'll go to you guys first before we look at the reaction from our listeners and Fantasyland. I talked about Stephon Diggs being the common thread, the common denominator in my rosters right now that are still alive and kicking, whether they got a bye week or they're going into the second round of their battle. I'll go to you first, Matt. Who's your common denominator?
Man, if I don't have Travis Kelce on every team that is still remaining, and this was, part of me, I was looking at it and I was like, how did I end up with Kelce in so many? I must have lucked into it, but then I was looking back and he was going at such a discount. There was all this conversation about, he's old, he's going to hit the cliff. And I'm looking around this offseason, getting them at a value. Like, there was nothing else. Sometimes we overthink things a little bit in the sense of Kelce's going to fall off a cliff. Well, who do you want instead? Hunter Henry? I don't know what to tell you. And so I have Kelce everywhere, man. And he's just smashing. So I think I have 5 teams left, and I'm pretty sure Kelce's on 4 of those teams.
I love that. Tight ends are like wine, guys. People who are ageist just across the board do not do well at tight end because they just don't the older they are, the more it's the hardest position. I always compare it. I know maybe 10% of our audience gets this, but it's like a defenseman in hockey. It's the hardest position to learn. So it'll take him the longest to fill those boots, per se. So you got to give those tight ends a chance. And that's the other reason why I don't necessarily draft them in those rookie drafts, is because I know they're going to take time to kick, to kick in. All right, guys. Or Theo, you haven't given us your guy, have you?
Oh, Devontae Adams. Hands down, it's Devontae Adams.
Nice.
My best teams have Devontae Adams. My best FFPC team right now has Devontae Adams. My best NFFC team has Devontae Adams. To me, Devontae Adams, what he's doing is just special. If he didn't miss those 2 games with injury, he would be even higher up there in the history books. But he is just so dominant. The connection he has with Aaron Rodgers right now is just unbelievable. And I think he's unstoppable. And I'm hoping he can just do it for 2 more weeks. But I think they might make a Super Bowl run the way that connection's going. So for me, it's Devontae Adams. He was a great draft pick this year. If you got him in the second round, you did great. If you got him at the end of the first, you did great. And it'll be interesting to see how high he goes next year. But I think it's going to be pretty high. I think all summer long we're going to kind of talk our way into Devontae Adams creeping up into that top 5 like Michael Thomas did this year. And I think it'll be well worth it. So for me, it's Devontae Adams.
Yeah, Adams and Diggs just taking my 500 FFPC dyno. That's my baby. Just the pillars, just sitting there. It's consistency, right?
It's awesome.
Consistency.
It's fantastic. Yep. It's fantastic.
And just to go back before I pass to Dan, because we talked about kind of strategies between now going into the off season, and I'm really getting back into sports cards. Specifically football, and it's actually helped me in Dynasty in a way. I thought it'd be the opposite of that. Dynasty would help me, which it has. But if you think about now going into the off season, right, and you think about the word hype, who gets the most hype going into the off season? It's whatever happens in the playoffs, right? So for me, whether it's sports cards or it's my Dynasty Reno modes, as I like to call them, I'm grabbing guys that have a chance to increase in value. And for me, those are guys that are going to be in the playoffs. And those are Packers, those are Chiefs, those are Rams. We talked about a lot of these guys tonight. And when you have a decision to make between, a guy on maybe the Washington or on a lesser team, lesser offense, think about what's going to happen between now and whether you're planning into the offseason, into next year, or 2 or 3 years down the road, depending on how you manage your team. Sorry, Dan, I keep kind of butting in front of what I do. I'm an only child. That's what I do.
No, I would have to say James Robinson. I have a couple of Devontae Adams teams, and unfortunately, other parts of my team completely torpedoed those teams, which is just it's so frustrating. I got a couple Derrick Henry teams where other parts of the team completely torpedoed them, and you see these guys just going off, and you're like, man, if I had only taken, this player instead of that player, and, I would have been right there. But that's the way it works in fantasy football sometimes. That one or two wrong players, and you never can quite recover from them. That happened. One of my best Davante Adams team, man, I had Michael Thomas on there. I thought Michael Thomas, Davante Adams, man, this team could be just blowing doors off people, and just didn't quite work out. But James Robinson, man, came out of nowhere. Obviously somebody that you weren't drafting unless you were doing it very late in the year, like almost September. But however you got him on your team, what a mainstay. He's done really, really well, and he just continues to do it. I mean, he's getting a ton of receptions. He's like top 5 of running backs in reception or of targets, which is just, I would never have guessed that. I traded for him on my 1250 Dynasty team in the middle of the season, thinking, well, this is a nice piece. I'm probably trading away a low first for him. He'll help me towards my run, and, if he ends up turning into nothing next year, he ends up turning into nothing next year. Now I think I paid a low first for him, and I think I'm probably going to be really, really happy with that price all the way through this year, and hopefully well into next year too.
It's better than those that bought James Conner for a low first. Right, Dan? Yeah, that's me. Trade Addicts 5, but that's all right. We're still live. Guys. We all right. So just
Conner. That's probably my biggest regret of the offseason. And it's so much everything looked so perfect. The Steelers, Roethlisberger's back. Conner did really well with, Roethlisberger back in 2018. You're just like, man, everything could come together really well, and this guy's available in the 3rd round a lot. And what a terrible pick.
Yeah, it's even more frustrating when it's just like, man, it's James Conner. He's not reliable. And that's what I think is key in fantasy, is if you can find guys that are reliable, like guys we talked about, Diggs, Adams, those kind of guys, Kelsey, at a position that's not reliable at all, it gives you an edge, man. Even quarterback we talked about earlier. So just guys that other listeners or people on Twitter, the Yeti Express mentions Nick Chubb for sure. Nick Chubb is just killing it. Derrick Henry. Juju is someone that comes up that people are actually surprised. And speaking of my 500 FFPC, again, a piece that he's like my wide receiver 5 on that roster. And how nice is that, to get one of these Steelers, Barkley, this guy's waving with his Barkley, Allen Robinson comes up often. J-Rob is definitely a guy that's come up often. Miles Sanders, people are mentioning. So go check out the tweet. I'll retweet it again. Josh Allen, another name that's coming up. Dan, I always go to you first when we close this thing out. I don't always. That's such a lie. I just we'll pretend.
Sometimes you do.
Sometimes I do. That's more what I meant to say. But why don't you let the people know? Remind the people where they can find your underhyped goodness and anything else you want to give the peeps before you close it out.
All right. Yeah, you can always find me on Twitter at Overhyped Sleeper. Drop the final E from Sleeper. And I'm just out there, trying to figure out how I'm going to win a few leagues this year, and how I'm going to start planning for my dynasty leagues next year. I'm already starting to dig into the salary caps and all the things that the teams need to have happen to, which teams are going to be surprisingly good or surprisingly bad is what I'm trying to find out right now, so I can start grabbing players at a bargain.
Matt, always a blast, brother. I appreciate you dropping some Christmas lights on you, just the festive, dropping the Devi goodness. Just we always appreciate you, man. We appreciate you taking the time. You're one of my favorite people to interact with in fantasy land. Remind the people where you at and all your goodness.
Yes, sir. Over on Twitter at the FF_educator. If you want to get in on the rookie action along with me, want to get like Dan, and you're like, I need a little bit more info here. Patreon.com/TheFFEducator. I have 125 rookies right now on my big board. Everything from NFL draft projection to fantasy football projection, strengths, weaknesses, tape review. And that's going to be updated and go all the way through the season, off season. So if you want to get in on that, patreon.com/TheFFEducator. Otherwise, on Twitter at the FF.
Yeah, you're looking for an edge,
educator.
right? And then that's why you listen to us on the weekly, and that's what Matt, the FF_educator, is offering you. So go get it. It's definitely one of the best values out there in fantasy land. Theo, rocking the new do. You've been becoming more and more regular. We like what you bring, man, and we hope the listeners do too. Remind them where they can find you and anything else you want to highlight before we close it out.
No, thanks, JD. The next 2 weeks, I'm hoping to close out and make some money, as a lot of us are at this point. I'm hoping I have a couple teams. I hope I have a couple teams that cash this year, and I think I have a chance at that. And we will see. But you can find me on Twitter at the OG Fantasy, and you can find my writing on BreakoutFinder.com. I do a weekly waiver wire article there, and I'll have some good stuff in the off season as well. And I'm just looking to close it out, and I'm happy to be here again. I really appreciate being on the GOAT District. This was a lot of fun tonight with you guys.
All right, guys, like we said, man, whether you're competing, whether you're still in it, not in it, looking to next year, reno mode, redo mode, whatever you want to call it, we hope we brought it for you tonight. You got 135 of pure goodness and pure gold with our awesome guest tonight. One quick correction that I wanted to bring up in the beginning that I kind of missed. MyBookie, one of our great partners, they offer an amazing deal. I may have misinterpreted the deal, so I want to clarify that they will match. Use the code GOAT, GOAT, on MyBookie when you make your initial deposit. They will match up to 50% of $1,000. So shout out to the FF Aviator out there for pointing that out to me, because sometimes we miss little details, and that's a big one. So I apologize if anyone got that wrong and was expecting it, but that's still very generous. So take advantage of that. That's still $500 you're getting in your face for free for making bets on sports, while we're giving you the edge so you can win. Again, Monkey Night Fight, use the code GOAT. You get an extra $50. Again, free money in your face to play on one of the hottest formats right now, not only in sports betting, not only in fantasy, just overall right now. Some different prop bets, DFS, fantasy football, all mixed into one. Whether you're into basketball, football, fight, UFC, they've got all kinds of sports on there. Go check it out. Monkey Knife Fight. And we said earlier, ViridianGlobal.com/collections/GOAT-District holiday sweater. Support Salvation Army during this holiday season. Look, man, there's people out there that they need some help. And that's one way you can support us and help those in need. All the proceeds go to the charity. This weekend's a big one, guys. I hope you listened. I hope you grabbed your pen and papers and marked down those writer downers, because you went through round two. We're going into round two this weekend. May all your matchups bring you W's. Thanks for listening, and we'll check you all later.
GOAT District, the Pope listens. Dynasty, our religion, for the blokes missing. On all of these trades, on all of these plays, on all of these grades. By the end of the day, y'all getting played. So, what you gonna do next? Try to fill up that flex? Send the homie a text? That trash offers the best? You try to make it complex, then they text you back. Now all of a sudden, they don't make any sense. Broaden your horizons, boy. Dynasty's not for the Simons, boy. These trades not for consignment, boy. Respect your opponent, y'all some piranhas, boy. This my advice from me to you. Open up your cute little podcast queue. Search up GOAT District, my dude. Pop it in your ear, man. Y'all know what to do. It's the... And I always be traded. And I always be traded. And I always be trading. Y'all try to betray them, but first you gotta bait them. Fish.
All right, guys.